This morning, the first one is a paper by Reverend Dr. Joseph Lee. He holds a Doctor of Ministry in Discipleship, Preaching, and Leadership from the Biola University, as well as a Master of Divinity from the Southwestern Baptist Theological Seminary. And he currently serves as a senior pastor at Bartley Christian Church in Singapore. And I'm looking forward to your talk. Yeah, okay. You will get some handout. Thank you.
Well, coming around is the handout for our presentation. And while it's going around, I first to apologise, Professor, the biography you described is not me. I don't have a doctorate in ministry. I'm not from Baylor, and I have so I'm not too sure how the biography was associated with me, but
okay.
No, so I apologise. I don't have those credentials as the professor had said. I'm a Salesian priest from Australia, working in Melbourne, and I'm speaking about canon law, which is probably different to what Professor Fegert was speaking about. So apologies for the introduction. I'm not that person, but it's probably someone else who's going to be presenting later on today. While it's going around, my presentation is probably better suited to a handout rather than PowerPoint slides, because some presentations lend themselves to slides and others may not. First of all, good morning, and thanks to the Scientific Committee for accepting the proposed paper in this area, and a special thanks to Mr. Simon Davies from the Organising Committee from Australia, who gave us some ideas about what might be helpful to the International Safeguarding Conference with respect to, say, canon law. And the main idea was something for practitioners, because the language of law can be difficult and alienating for people not quite familiar, or especially with church law. And so the idea is to present something that might be helpful for us as practitioners in various fields and various local contexts and situations where we fit in safeguarding, and some of the things which might be presented here maybe come as a bit of a shock, or you may not fully agree with. So apologise if some of it might be seen to be insensitive to the work we do. Also apologise to Sister Jose, who was presenting yesterday on the Charter. I'm going to go against Sister's Charter, where Sister recommends avoid legal language. This is going to be the very opposite of what Sister recommends. We are using legal language, and this is in the area of what Sister Jane and Sister Teresa was presenting with the CASILP in the sister lawyers in Kenya, so maybe this is more down their line. And yesterday in the presentation from Irene and from Christian, they mentioned something about canon law, so this might be a good introduction. And what Professor Fegert was speaking about, the universal principles, this is also down the professors thinking about the universal and how that might help the global, local, with cultural sensitivities built in as well too. So starting from the idea of first of all, the first point in the presentation is that canon law is intercultural. There is the universal, and there's also, of course, what we know, the local church, but there's also the universal church. And when we speak about canon law, probably speaking about two things, what's called the CIC, the Codex Iuris Canonici, which is a book of canons from number 1 to 1752, and also the Code of Canons for the Eastern Churches, the CCEO, That's from Canon 1 to Canon 1546. And because it's universal, it applies to all the Catholic Church, Catholic meaning worldwide, universal. The small c Catholic means global universal church. So wherever the church is, that's the law that applies. Irrespective of our language, our culture, that is the law as it is. Of course, how it is applied in local situations is very different. I was thinking that's fine because that's universal. Then I realised, no, there is culture involved because the Code of Canons for the Eastern Churches is cultural and intercultural. So these are the churches which would be, for example, in Lebanon, the Maronite churches, the Catholic Maronite churches, or the Catholic Melkite churches, or the Ukrainian Catholic churches, or the Syro-Malabar and the Syro-Malankara churches in India, or the Ethiopian Catholic Church, or the Coptic, which is the Egypt Catholic Church, the Syrian Catholic Church, and so on. So all those Eastern churches, because they name a region and a country, they are going to be, once you say, cultural. So in one sense, the law is universal, but also there are very specific cultural groups in the churches. So there's 23 or so churches. The Latin Western Church, the Roman Catholic Church, is the largest, but doesn't mean we're the best. And each of those equal churches is equally Catholic. And the Holy Father is the centre of unity for the whole universal church. Where people come into contact with canon law is probably not through safeguarding. It's going to be through, say, the church's processes. For example, marriage annulments. Most people might come into canon law through maybe working with divorced couples seeking to remarry. Marriage enjoys the favour of the law, so marriages are presumed to be valid unless investigated. So a couple comes and they're divorced and they want to seek whether their first marriage was valid or invalid, so they have to go through a tribunal process at the marriage tribunal. And also the other way, if someone was married outside the church and they want to regularise their marriage, they'll approach the church for what we call convalidation. So the marriage in the registry office, which was done outside canonical form, can be regularised and brought into the church. So it also regularises marriages and they want to. Also through liturgical law as well too, so how the sacraments are celebrated, what the rules are, what the rubrics are, and so that we might come into contact through the law if we are sometimes engaged in vigorous liturgical disputes with other people. Canon 2 says, for most part, the code does not determine the rites to be observed in the celebration of liturgical action. So that means there is these canons in the code, but then the way the liturgy is celebrated has its own books, its own ritual books that will be looked to for law. How the law relates to ethics. Pope St. John Paul, who brought in the 83 code through at his time, says that St. Paul, we're justified not by works of the law, but by faith. Yet Paul does not exclude the 10 Commandments. He also wrote about the importance of discipline in the church. And so Pope St. John Paul says that there is the rule for law as well as for faith as well. How does it relate to sin? The Catechism of the Catholic Church teaches that sin is an offence against reason, truth, and right conscience. It is a failure in genuine love of God and neighbour caused by a perverse attachment to certain goods. And number 1850, sin is an offence against God. Against you alone have I sinned, and what that is evil in your sight I have done. So some sins might be subject of a canon, like Canon 1397 on murder, and the law is more objective and sin is more personal. Okay, so we might go 5 minutes left. We're going to go accountability, that's number 2. So skip down to accountability. Safeguarding involves perpetrators who have perpetrated crimes, and they are in the revised Book 6, which Pope Francis brought out in 2021. Then the Pope Francis Vos Estis Lux Mundi in 2019 set out universal procedures for bishops and their equivalents to prevent and combat crimes of sexual abuse. The new version of Vos Estis Lux Mundi in 2023 came in 23, so some changes there. The dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, the Vade Mecum, the norms on procedures and investigations. It applies to clerics, and clerics means bishops, priests, and deacons. So our work may be involved with there. So for practitioners, we live in two worlds. There's the world of the church and the world of the state. And so there's two sets of laws that we normally have to come in. What the state says, the government, and what the canonical matters. So normally we refer to the bishop, the judicial vicar, the vicar general, with the ordinary power to, the bishop as the judicial vicar has the ordinary power to judge. Okay, number 3, let's go on to persons and the innocents. So this is the other 10% implied by Pope Leo XIV. Pope Leo acknowledged that it is a real crisis, saying victims must be treated with greater respect and with an understanding that those who have suffered very deep wounds because of abuse sometimes carry these wounds for their entire life. In an interview, Pope Leo cites statistics showing that over 90% of people who come forward make accusations that are authentic victims. In other words, they do not make things up. However, he said there are also proven cases of some kind of false allegations, and some priests have had their lives destroyed because of that. An accusation does not take away the presumption of innocence, the Pope insisted, adding, so priests have to be protected, or the accused has to be protected. Their rights have to be respected. Still, he recognised even saying that at times is a cause of greater pain for the victims. In any case, the interview says, he continued citing the very good insight of Pope Francis, the issue of sexual abuse cannot become the centre focus of the Church. After noting that the vast majority of people committed to the Church have never abused anyone, he continued, we can't make the whole Church focus exclusively on this issue because that would not be an authentic response to what the world is looking for in terms of need for the mission of the Church. Dr. Virginia Miller is an Australian researcher, and she published a book with the kind of second edition, open access, so you can download it from Firenze University Press. And Dr. Miller says, think about the inquiries. The Australian and the Irish inquiries, particularly the Ferns inquiry, Murphy inquiry, and the Cloyne inquiry, these inquiries publish statistics regarding the number of allegations they received and the percentage numbers of priests who have been media without appropriate qualifiers, and therefore create the impression that large numbers of currently serving priests were guilty of child sexual abuse. This cavalier, indeed misleading, reporting of allegations of child sexual abuse has been extremely and unfairly damaging to the reputation of the Catholic Church and horrendous for those bishops and priests who are in fact innocent of the crimes and misdemeanours they have been accused of. With Professor Carlin Demazure speaks about primary victims and secondary victims and tertiary victims, so all those friends of the families who have been abused, and also suffering too, the Catholic community as a whole is suffering. Okay, with the time remaining, let's go on to number 4 on secrecy. So probably on the back page. Pope Francis abolished the pontifical secret in cases of sexual abuse, and so that's gone. Then there's the discussion about, so secrecy might be the opposite of transparency, but so we abolished that, may make it more transparent. On the discussion about the confessor and the seal of confession, there was debate about what can or cannot be revealed. So in 2019, approved by Pope Francis, the Apostolic Penitentiary said this: the confessor is absolutely forbidden, even for any reason, to betray the penitent in word or in manner, as well as the confessor is prohibited completely from using any knowledge acquired from confession to the detriment of the penitent, even when any danger of revelation is excluded. The doctrine also helped to further specify the content of the sacramental seal, which includes all the sins of both the penitent and others known from the penitent's confession, both mortal and venial, both occult and public, as well as manifested in order to absolution, and therefore known to the confessor by virtue of sacramental signs. The sacramental seal therefore regards everything the penitent has accused, even the event that the confessor does not grant absolution. If the confession is invalid for some reason, the absolution is not given, however, the seal must be maintained. James Parker is an abuse survivor, advocate, writer, speaker, speaking to the West Australian Parliament. Dear Legislation Committee, I write to you as a 50-year-old male who was sexually abused by 11 different perpetrators from the age of 8 for the further decade. As a non-Catholic while still a teenager, I went to confession. The Catholic priest was amazing. He, of course, respected my need for utter privacy. I've been honoured to walk alongside survivors and survivor groups for many years now, and his own private research suggests that 1 out of 67 priests recalls a perpetrator alluding to abuse on occasions in the 1970s. I feel confident to derive from what I've been told of these 67 ordained men that child abusers do not use the Catholic confessional, but that tender, fragile, and sometimes suicidal victims and survivors do. Okay, let's conclude with the... yes, it's time to... Can I go to the back page? Conclusion about beyond truth and speaking the truth in love. Pope Leo was speaking to the Roman Rota and said that what we do is done with justice and charity, and also truth and charity. Finally, from Pope Leo himself in the encyclical that's been mentioned, in some regions of the world, children and adolescents work in dangerous conditions, crushing the materials from which rare earth elements are extracted. The bodies of these people are scarred, injured, and worn down so that computational flow may continue uninterruptedly. Moreover, criminal networks use online platforms, messaging systems, anonymous payment methods, and profiling techniques in order to recruit, control, and transport victims of trafficking, very often minors, reducing men and women to data to be tracked and packages to be moved around with the same digital circuits to support much of the global economy. This reality deeply challenges the moral conscience of our time. Of course, that's not magnificent humanity, that's humanity gone mad about how people treat us. So the thing is, we can have the law, we can have the principles and the policies, but unless the practitioners do something, the laws and the principles and the law will still remain the same. Thank you for your listening and your attention. Thank you, Professor.